Oh, the devil are we? So, we're looking at some more reality check. Now, what revelations are coming out this week? Let's take a look.
All right, Ross, thank you. Another update that we'd love your reaction to. Our favorite, the Wall Street Journal, they have also recently reported that the DOJ told President Trump in May that his name was in the Epstein files. And then Representative Maxwell Frost, he's from Florida, he reposted this reporting on X saying the White House is about to drop proof of aliens. Is he making light of these topics? What do you think about this?
The Epstein files just will not go away, will it? But I think he's probably taking the mick there a little bit. Okay, can you imagine though? Shit, the Epstein files, quick, release the aliens.
I think he's taking the piss, to be perfectly honest. I don't think it's a serious observation. And sadly, would be wonderful if the White House did finally decide to use the ultimate distraction, which would be UAPs right now. I do think that this is a good time for President Trump to be thinking about pulling that ace card out of the pack. I know that he's aware of breakthrough technologies that have been achieved by certain aerospace companies in America. And now
Lockheed Martin.
would be a good time to be more candid about where those technologies came from and what we know about.
It's going to be a sad state of affairs when the old disclosure thing will be Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or one of the other sort of big contractors comes out and says, yes, we've made a breakthrough in technology, but we made this breakthrough through 50 years ago, and all the UFOs are ours. And they're trying to do disclosure of technology rather than of what the NHI subject is.
NHI, but I'm not holding my breath that either the president or indeed the Congress is seriously interested
Keeps calling it the Congress. Is it just me? Is anybody else going, well, yeah, because it's called the Congress.
in disclosure right now. There seems to be a very determined effort to put it all back in the box, sadly. And I just don't think that's going to work. What they're doing is leaving themselves wide open to catastrophic disclosure, bullying, threatening, trying to gag people. It's not going to work, guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's more whistleblowers coming out. Apparently, there's supposed to be more first-hand whistleblowers coming soon. Burleson mentioned that as part of the hearings. So I think it's slowly but surely making its way into the public domain, but it's how they spin the narrative, basically. The general public, if the general public was tipped, like 50% of the general public wanted to know about the UAP subject, then I think it puts more pressure on. But I think the general public doesn't care. I think the general public's more interested in the Epstein files. It's more interested in how it's going to pay its bills, the migration issue at the moment.
Okay, we will go to our next question. We had an overwhelming number of people who wanted to hear from you about this. We'll take Jordan's question from X. Ross, thoughts on the video posted by Dennis Asperg regarding the work of Beatriz Villarroel is doing and the alleged scientific paper going out for peer review?
Okay, I am really excited by Dr. Beatriz Villarroel's paper.
To be fair, I had to Google Beatriz Villarreal. I cannot pronounce her last name, so I won't even try. I'll just butcher it. Villarreal. Because obviously I can pronounce the football team's name. I had to Google her. It's really interesting.
It is absolutely extraordinary. She's released it as a preprint while it's still in peer review, and I'm happy to announce that we will shortly be interviewing Beatrice when unfortunately, she's got flu at the moment, and we wish her the very best. But when she has recovered, we will be bringing you the first interview with her where we get the opportunity to talk to her in detail about the findings that she's made. As viewers of Reality Check would know, we've previously interviewed Dr. Villarroel about her discovery of so-called transients.
I just wonder whether... I know Ross is probably going to go into detail now around what the actual white papers are going to be about, but when I Googled it, I sort of thought, this isn't really a disclosure moment. It adds to the topic, but I'll let Ross explain.
It's a really clever idea. It's one of those really nifty scientific ideas, which is to look at pre-1957, so pre-human satellites or rockets in space, pre-1957, pre-Sputnik. What did the glass photographic plates show? And the data set that she's been using is the Palomar Observatory data set. And she's looking at photographs. In the original interview we did, she looked at photographs around, particularly, for example, the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO wave, when we know there were vast numbers of strange, anomalous objects witnessed by the military, radar operators, and civilians, and a whole variety of people over Washington, D.C.
It does seem that since nuclear, I think UFOs have always been spotted. There's reports going back as far as human history. So, but it seems like after the nuclear age started, the sightings in UFOs have just been escalating significantly. And 1952 being a few years after, obviously, the 40s where nuclear weapons were tested. Don't know if there's a correlation there or not.
They didn't land on the White House lawn, but they sure as hell put on a show. And what Beatriz discovered, we reported on this about 10 months ago, is that there were objects in space, in orbit, that were in orbit on the exact dates of the period in, I think it was June, July of 1952 when this flyover occurred, and they disappeared shortly thereafter. Something was in geosynchronous orbit or around or thereabouts. Now, what Beatriz has now done in the paper that she's just published, she's basically looked at transients again, and she's narrowed down transients that appear in apparent lines. And what she's discovered is just extraordinary. I'm very excited to talk to her about this. There are lines of potentially over 100,000 objects that are specular. They have flat, reflective, mirror-like surfaces, which suggests technology or artificial construction. They are not human.
Well, to be fair, it's a really unique sort of approach to try to prove that technology was in orbit before humans put technology in orbit. But because we're going back so long, and there's going to be people who come out and peer review it and go, it could be this, it could be reflective meteorites, it could be this. I just don't think it's going to have the weight that Ross thinks it's going to do. He's making out like it's going to be absolutely massive and it's going to blow the lid off everything. Possibly, but I don't know. I really don't know.
Very excited about that, Ross. We will move on to Mike. He says, Ross, I have a question relating to the funding for the passive radar project discussed by you and Mitch Randall. Why are the leading wealth makers out there in industry slow, if not reluctant to fund projects such as that now being developed by Mitch Randall? I would have thought that our leading wealth makers would have the same desire as the rest of us to resolve this ongoing question of NHI and UAP entering our world. Regards, Mike.
Well, I think the leading wealth makers just focused on making more wealth.
Okay, so Mike's asking about the passive radar system that's proposed by Mitch Randall, a very clever fellow who I had the pleasure of meeting at Contact in the Desert. And Mitch proposes that we use existing electromagnetic bandwidth, FM radio signals, digital TV signals, and objects flying through that bandwidth interrupt those signals, and it can be read passively. And that kind of data can actually provide a very, very interesting and actually arguably more effective type of radar than active radar, where we're...
Yeah, because I mean, stealth technology is all designed to basically evade active radar. But NHI tech, talking something 1,000 years advanced, which doesn't want to show up on radar.
Squirting out a beam at objects to see whether we can measure them. So the proposed passive radar system that Mitch is proposing is essentially software-defined radio receivers bought by members of the public and located all over the United States. And he estimated that for around about, I think, $5 million, you could basically set up a system like that. There's probably also another $5 million build on top of that to develop all the algorithms.
It's only $5 million, plus another $5 million, and then another $5 million to get it out there.
And you could actually cover the entire continental United States. Now,
Is there not reasons why you wouldn't want to do that though? It does passive radar. It interrupts sort of signals, be that radio signals, TV signals. I don't know. You know what I mean? It sounds like a really interesting theory on paper.
this isn't a new idea. Mitch is developing on an idea that was developed back in the 1930s by some British scientists. But it's a super clever idea using modern, up-to-date digital technology and encouraging the public to be part of essentially a citizen science project.
All right, thank you so much. We are going to go to our next question. And we've talked about this before, Russ, but you have so much going on right now and so many news stories coming that I think it's important to remind our viewers what you actually do all day, every day, and all night. This question comes from UFO Enjoyer. What does Ross's sourcing process look like? Would love to hear more about how he vets his sources and substantially the info they
Subsequently,
give him. Thanks.
That's a good question. I mean, generally, the way I work is very much like most investigative journalists work. You never rely on a single source. You rely on multiple corroborative sources with direct knowledge of what we're talking about. One of the issues that I have, a lot of people say to me, why don't you just throw everything out into the public domain? It's a
dare I say it again? Where's the giant UFO, Ross? Where's the giant UFO?
silly idea because you have to protect sources. One of the most fundamental things for me as a journalist is the ethical obligation that I have to the people who reach out to me. And a lot of people reach out to me sometimes just in snail mail. They just send me a letter. They'll send me a message through an encrypted app, or I'll get an oblique message through another comms system. And then we have to figure out a way of creating a system of protecting their identity while at the same time allowing them to communicate with me. And if people knew the elaborate efforts that I go to try to communicate with people securely, which often includes dead letter boxes on the dark web.
The problem with the dark web that people are of this opinion that it's all secret and can't be hacked. Government agencies probably know everything that's going on the dark web.
Literally creating, in some cases, an email server on the dark web with a fake name, using Tor, which is a type of VPN encryption system. And I go to enormous efforts to try and protect people. And that might frustrate people that I often can't identify my sources. I am talking to people whom I am satisfied are working with direct knowledge of a legacy crash retrieval, that's UAP, non-human craft retrieval and reverse engineering program.
I want the scientists. I want the Brent Spinner from Independence Day types. You know, the guys who are actually working on the technology to say, yes, we've checked the materials, blah, 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 we've done this, the propulsion systems are this. Rather than, like, I don't know, Jada Barber is interesting because it's how the whole sort of retrieval operation takes place. But yeah, I want the scientists.
And just one more note on that, on how great you are at protecting your sources. Even as your producer, I wasn't allowed to know Jake Barber's name until almost close to showtime and after we got the footage and interviewed him. And, you know, I
There's a need to know, Megan. You don't need to know.
helped write that show. So great job, Ross.
Yeah, I tell you what. I mean, that's a classic illustration, actually. I mean, I
Yeah.
still get quite emotional. There was a moment when Jake told me he was going to tell the aerospace defense contractor company that he was concerned about things that they were doing that weren't being revealed, and he was going to confront them about it. And I was talking with him about the dangers that posed, and it was a raw act of bravery on Jake's part to basically make that decision, to go and give them the opportunity to respond.
Hopefully, he told Ross everything he knew before he did that, though, because that would have been a bit of a rocky move. I'm just going to go and have a word with them. Never seen again.
And he warned me that he was going to be out of contact for possibly a few days. And I remember I counted down the days. We essentially created a dead man switch because I knew that essentially if he didn't respond, something had happened. And
Yeah, I suppose he would have gone in, though, and said, look, I've got these concerns. I don't agree with what's happening here. But by the way, if I get into an accident or I somehow unalive myself in the next couple of days, there are people who are aware, people who are very well known in this topic, so make a good choice.
I remember there was a real hole in my belly. I was thinking, oh my God, what has happened to him? And this is one of the things that you think about as a journalist is you're living with the stress and the strain of encouraging these people to come public, Jake being one of them. And there are many others at the moment who are deliberating about what to do. They're not very happy, frankly, with the way that Congress is frankly sitting on evidence. And
Can someone tell me, please? I might have missed it, but Jake Barber, obviously, for those who don't know who Jake Barber is, he's the pilot of the helicopter that apparently went out on retrieval operations to retrieve non-human intelligent craft. I think not just NHI, but he retrieved other sort of craft as well and other sort of military tech. But then I think the famous egg video was linked directly to him, but apparently he said it's not actually his video, but it's very similar to something that he's retrieved. In the video, we didn't see any trucks picking up the egg. We didn't see the sort of terrain where it was. He called it the range where they would actually retrieve these things from. So, can anyone tell me, actually, has he ever come out and said, this is how the operation worked? Like, I would pick it up, someone on the helicopter would have to harness it, or someone on the ground would harness the egg, and then, or even just have a rope ready, and then we just hook it to the helicopter and off we go. We drop it in this location, and then off we go. They dropped it on the ground and it rolled. I'm thinking, why didn't they just drop it straight onto a truck? There seems to be a lot of holes in the operation at the minute, and I'm not sure if he's ever come out and filled those gaps in.
ignoring it.
Yeah, but I think this question from Shannon is kind of the natural follow out of that. Big fan here. You're one of the
That's a question and a half.
few vital sources I rely on for UAP related news, which is why this question keeps coming up every time I watch Reality Check. We've heard accounts of whistleblower intimidation, sometimes worse, often attributed to enforcers within or linked to legacy programs or even the mysterious men in black or non human entities. The stakes are clearly high for whistleblowers and witnesses, but what about journalists like you? Without your reporting and that of colleagues like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, many of us would never hear these testimonies. In my view, that makes your role even more crucial to disclosure than the whistleblowers themselves. Given that, I'm surprised we haven't heard more about legacy program agents or men in black targeting journalists to silence them. Or have they? Have you or other journalists encountered threats or intimidation related to this topic? If yes, can you talk about it? Thanks for all you do. Wishing you continued safety.
Look, I haven't really suffered any overt intimidation. I was pulled aside once by Customs and Border Protection and held indefinitely for a couple of hours. And eventually they let me go because I threatened to do a TV interview saying they were holding me without any explanation. Um,
Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Now, I'm not saying he did that, but I don't know. Other people have been held for probably longer than that, to be honest.
Look, I think part of the issue is I have the backing of an organisation like News Nation. One of the things for journalists is at least we have the capacity to go public with what we know. If somebody is threatening us, the first thing I would do is put it on national TV. Um, the simple fact is the worst kind of intimidation is the trolling that occurs and it's hilarious. It's kind of funny, really. They're all troll accounts created on Twitter, X, that were created at a certain time. I suspect when they became aware that I was talking to Jake Barber, which is October, November last year. And there's a preponderance of Twitter accounts with weird names or just numbers in them that all say the same thing. They all use the same derogatory language. And frankly, they are probably a psyops operation being.
You look at Reddit. Reddit has become a cesspit. I'm not saying it always wasn't, but the UFO community used to always have, like, full frank discussions, like, oh, look about this, and someone would go, but it could be this, it could be this, and then you'd have, and more often than not, it was kind of respectful conversation. Now it's like everyone throws jokes in there, or a derogatory claim, or starts throwing in other things to the point where it degrades the conversation really quickly, and I think that's done on purpose.
Run out of some military intelligence barracks somewhere in the deep south. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know where it is.
Because people, by contrition, will just think, just giving up on this. They don't want to share information, they don't want to discuss it, because, yeah. I'm not sure about X, because I've not been on there long enough.
Filmed the exterior. We're very aware of an ongoing psychological operation. I mean, part of the operation was to brief the Wall Street Journal with that ludicrous story that they ran a few weeks back where they tried to suggest there was nothing to the whole UAP issue, and they tried to suggest that the missile interferences by the phenomenon at certain nuclear missile sites were just part of an electromagnetic pulse test.
That's what you want to do. You've got nuclear missiles in the silos. Let's do an EMP test on them. Sounds plausible.
Crazy, wacky, deranged theory has now mercifully been blown out of the water and shown to be patently untrue and false. And look, frankly, I think the ignominious departure of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and Tim Phillips from Arrow is a good thing. There's a new broom in Arrow, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Pentagon's UAP investigation office, and I do get the impression that despite the heavy constraints that he's under, Kozlowski is actually serious about getting to the truth.
I do think under John K, because my pronunciation of that last name, especially now, I'm bunged up, bit of a cold. I'll butcher it, but I do think Arrow is probably gone down a different route, and it's a little bit more approachable. But I just think the damage has been done, and I don't think it's got the power it should have to achieve what it needs to achieve. And it won't surprise me if Trump defunds it by the end of the year.
Looking forward to it. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. We'll go to an email from Martin. Hello, Ross. It's being said that within the government and or within the control group, there are think tanks where they are currently trying to hash out how to go forward with disclosure. Do you have a take on this? Cheers, Martin.
You're talking in the present tense. There certainly was a control group. There was a working party that a whole group of people were part of about 20 years ago. And more recently, I do think that the WikiLeaks leaks of the John Podesta emails, and people keep on missing the significance of this. The Podesta emails, Podesta was a former Obama staffer. He was working as a senior advisor to Hillary Clinton. And I think in the run-up to the 2015 election period, there was an expectation that Hillary Clinton was going to become the new president. Instead, of course, it was Donald Trump. And I think a lot of people in the defense, military, intelligence establishment made the call, quite rightly, that if Clinton came into power, she was going to mandate UAP disclosure. She'd made no secret of the fact that she was going to get to the truth because President Clinton had himself been frustrated when he tried to get to the truth as president himself. So people like General Neil McCasland, General Michael Carey, Richard Weiss of Lockheed Martin, John Podesta in the White House under Obama, they were basically preparing for the likelihood of a Hillary Clinton victory. And there was a disclosure planned. And I think To the Stars Academy, Lou Elizondo, Tom DeLonge, Jim Semivan, all of these people who came forward from the dark world, they were part of a plan to essentially have a public face of disclosure.
A lot of people thought that they were kind of trying to do a soft disclosure by making it look like they were coming out against the establishment, but they were probably working for the establishment. Once you're in intelligence, you're always in intelligence.
And to some extent, I guess that was an attempt, an understandable attempt by the military and the intelligence community to try and control the narrative. And look, it failed because the simple fact is Donald Trump came into power, and I think then the military and the intelligence community reflexively decided that they didn't trust Trump to be a disclosure president, probably because they know they can't control him.
Yeah, some interesting segments. I think the last one is food for thought. Everyone's probably sitting there thinking Trump would come in and go, I'm going to blow the lid off this and disclose everything. But would he? Would he indeed? I don't think the establishment would trust him. I think he's got in there and he's moved key people out of their roles and moved people in. I think if he was briefed and it was like, this is for the betterment of the United States, this technology that we have and the interaction that we've had with NHI in the past, he would probably keep it secret. He probably would. Yeah, some interesting thoughts in there. Let me know what you think. So do me a favour, hit that subscribe if you will. More important, drop me a comment because I thrive off comments more than I do subscriptions. Cheers. See you on the next one.